Hi, this is Esther with Discover Your Origins. I'm working on James Lloyd Thomas today, and we're going to talk about his Civil War service to see if we can't learn some more. This was based on a research suggestion. If you haven't seen the previous video, I'll have a link in the description box below. Just as a recap, we have this James Lloyd Thomas. We have him born in 1834. He died before 1910. I did update this death date because I went and looked to see if Emily was listed as a widow in the 1910 census, and it wasn't linked to her profile. And so I went and found it, and sure enough, she is a widow in 1910. So we can go and look at that. Yep, here she is, a widow. And she's living with her son from her first marriage, Thomas Mann. So that's what happened to her. She is a widow by 1910. So that means that James died between 1900 and 1910. So I did update that on this profile. But the whole reason that we're looking at James Lloyd Thomas is because we're trying to figure out who his parents are, if they are really John L. Thomas, because there are two James L. Thomases in the household, and it doesn't seem like they are duplicates. They could be the same person, so we're trying to figure that out. They could be two separate men, and they are just mixed up and attached to the same set of parents. So today we're going to look at the Civil War service of James Lloyd Thomas and see if we can't find more information about his Civil War service through Fold 3. And as of April 2025, Ancestry has made Fold 3 available for free to look at Civil War service records. So I'm going to take a few minutes and we're going to actually look at some of those. But first, the person who submitted this gave me a link to the Confederate pension record for J.L. Thomas. And it does seem to match, so we're going to consider this a good source. And we have J.L. Thomas and Emily Thomas as a spouse. And so let's jump in there and take a look. Now this source record is a little bit mixed up. So there are three types of pension applications that you can look at. The first is a survivor, the second is a widow application, and then the third is a rejection. And this particular folder has both. So we're going to take a look at each document and see what we can learn about J.L. Thomas. And so let's go in here. All right, so this first one is, I think, part of the widow's application. It doesn't say on here, but one thing that I noticed, I did look at this ahead of time, is that the documents are mixed up. And so we have to kind of keep that in mind as we're looking. But we have Emila, and it is in Jefferson County. And one thing to know is they don't appear to own any real estate at the time of application. So this is 1901 to 1908, and they don't appear to own any real estate. So it makes me wonder if they ever owned real estate, and it's possible they might have for a short time, or they never did, and they just rented. And their personal property was only worth $25, and that was household and kitchen furniture. So they didn't have any valuables, they didn't have any animals, and they are older at this point, and so it's possible that they could have just passed on whatever farm they had to children. But just to note that they really didn't have any property. One of the requirements for being able to successfully get a pension was to show that you were in financial need. And so this would be really important to show the reviewers that they didn't have any property. All right, moving on. This next one. Okay, so this is part of the widow's application. You can see application of Emila Thomas, and she was awarded the pension and assigned to a class number 4. I'm not 100% sure what that class meant. It would probably refer to the amount of money that she would have been awarded. Most likely it was not very much money. So the pensions were pretty small. So, and if Emila was applying for herself, that means she is a widow as of the date of this application. So August 13th, 1908. So she is a widow by 1908. So we could go and update J.L. Thomas's profile and family search and say that his death was before 1908, probably. But let's keep looking and see if we can find an actual death date, because she would have had to report a death date. All right, so here we go. A pension application of a widow of a deceased soldier. And here she is. Here's her name, Emila Thomas, in Jefferson County. Her husband is J.L. Thomas. He served as a private in Company C of the 31st Regiment of Alabama Volunteers. And here is his death date, 26th of January, 1908. So I've taken notes as I've gone through, so I'm not going to show you that I've taken notes, but we're going to update his death date in Family Search. The person who submitted this has another tree on Ancestry where they've recorded this date. So this is a really great source for that death date. Now, he was on a state pension roll previous to this date, and this is the number or the file number for his previously awarded pension. This reference number may or may not be useful as far as looking for additional documents. I think everything is in this folder. All right, let's go. You can see this is her signature. She didn't sign with an X. So that's interesting. Sometimes you'll see an X and it will say her mark, and that's not the case here. So she could read and write, probably. Okay, let's go on. All right. Now, as part of going through this, we want to take note of any witnesses. A witness statement will usually say that they are personally acquainted with the person and that they are widows and they have not remarried or they are in financial need, those kinds of things. So we want to make a note of any witnesses, because those are people who would be considered part of the friends, associate, and neighbors group of people that could be researched to see if there's any more information about a person. So MJ Yah is a witness. H.T. Tucker is another witness. And we have a third witness, N.A. Groban, it looks like. So we want to make note of them. Whether we ever research them or not, may not happen, but we want to make note. All right. Okay, so this document here's that reference number for that pension number. It says class number 4, application of J.L. Thomas. So this is the soldier application. And we can see Jefferson County, and the application date is 27th of August, 1901. And actually, I think that's the approval date because it says he was granted class 4 pension. Okay, let's go on. All right, this is a part of the application here. So it says J.L. Thomas. He was enlisted as a private in Company C, the 31st Alabama Regiment, on the 18th day of April, 1862. This is important because we're going to look for his military packet, and we want to try to match up these details on the military packet so we identify the right person. And it says he enlisted at Mims Crossroads, Shelby County, Alabama. And it is curious to me that he enlisted in Shelby County versus Jefferson County. It did happen, although it was more typical of somebody to enlist in their home county. So there probably were reasons, but he was discharged on the 4th of July, 1865. It says he did not desert, and this says here he was never wounded, and that he is currently blind at the age of 67, and his current post office address is Clay, Jefferson County. So that location could be important. So we want to make note of that. And you can see here, he couldn't sign his own name. So here's his mark, and someone else signed his name. Okay, so next we have witness statements. And now these, because they personally knew J.L. Thomas, we want to make a special note of. And so we have judge of the probate. So he's saying that J.L. Thomas personally appeared. Here's the witnesses, J.W. Neighbors. So that's the first one. And then the second one is J.W. Osley. So those two men we'll probably want to research at some point and maybe add to our research plan to find out who these men are and where they lived. If they lived in Otaga County at some point, that could indicate that those two separate profiles are for the same person through indirect evidence. All right, let's go forward here. Okay, so he had, again, to state his financial details. It said no real estate. He had no animals, no guns. He did have a clock and kitchen furniture worth about $52. So after he died, his wife only had the household kitchen furniture. So she was in pretty desperate straits, I think, at that point. All right, so here's more of the application. Private Company C, 31st Alabama Infantry. And in May of 1864 at Baker's Creek in the state of Mississippi, he was shot in the right shoulder. And I think that might be Vicksburg. I'll have to look and see when Vicksburg was. We'll need to learn more about the 31st Regiment and see what battles they were involved with. Okay, his post office address was Clay. He's not doing any, he's not really working, and he doesn't really have, well, he was engaged in farming, but he's probably working on somebody else's farm, and he has no taxable property. All right. So that's probably the front page of the application. It's blank, and that's the end of it. That's the next person. So going through all of that, I did make notes. I created a separate page here on the Civil War. So here are the notes from the pension application. And I have a citation here for this pension application that we could use to attach in Family Search. We could also probably look for the pension application in Family Search and attach it to James Lloyd Thomas as well. All right, so the next thing is we need to go to Jefferson County, because that's where he lived, and look at the military records. So here are some links. And the thing that I like to look at is the regiments. So these regiments don't match up or align with Shelby County. So we're going to look at Shelby County too, but this is just a place to start. So if he had enlisted in Jefferson County, these are the military units that he most likely would have been in. But because he was in Shelby County, he enlisted there. I'll just take a note. Here's Jefferson County on the map. It's kind of in the north central part of the state, and Shelby County is just south of Jefferson County. So perhaps he lived on the border. I looked up Clay, and it is not too far from the border, but I would have expected him to go to Birmingham to enlist, and he didn't. So that's curious. All right, so we'll go down to military records, and here we go. Here is the 31st Regiment Alabama Infantry. So that's good to know. And there is a link here so we can go and learn a little bit more. And here are the different companies and where they came from. Now, Company C says mostly men from Cherokee County were in that regiment. And Shelby County was mostly in Company K. That doesn't mean anything necessarily, but what happened is that the men would be involved in a conflict, there would be casualties, and then the companies would be reformed, or sometimes they would be merged together. So this doesn't necessarily mean that the information is wrong. He probably started in Company K and ended up in Company C at some point. Now, this Civil War soldiers and sailors is useful. So let's go there. And I do have a direct link to the 31st Alabama Regiment just to save time, but this is what it is, and you can then search for your ancestor, or you could search for the regiment and learn more about the battles they may have been involved with. So here's the 31st Regiment of Alabama, and he was in the infantry, and so luckily there is some information here. And these are the battles that he would have been involved with. And so he took part in the fight at Cumberland Gap and Tazewell, then moved to Kentucky, then went to Mississippi and fought at Chickasaw Bayou, Port Gibson, and Champions Hill, and then was captured after the long siege of Vicksburg. So pretty good chance he was a prisoner of war. And then he was exchanged and reorganized into a new unit. So that's probably when he ended up in Company C, and then was involved in the Battle of Chattanooga to Bentonville. And it says it was organized with over 1,000 men, lost 21 killed, 37 wounded at Vicksburg, and so on. So we'll just take note of that and see what we can find out by looking for his military packet. So the link that we want to look at is this Alabama Civil War Service Records. And this is just an index of the records on Fold 3. And I find it's sometimes easier to start here than going directly to Fold 3. So let's open that up and do a search. And look for J.L. Thomas. And he was, I'm going to put Jefferson County, but we may have to change that up and do Shelby County, but let's see if we can't find Jefferson County. And this one here immediately caught my eye because the birth was 1837. So if his birth was recorded in his military packet, then it would show, and that's pretty close to 1834. So now this is just an index we can then view on Fold 3. So I'm already logged in, and I'm going to go ahead and we're going to jump over there and look at it. Okay, so sometimes when you go from Family Search to Fold 3, it will place you in the middle of the packet, so you have to go back. So here we are, we're on page 1, and the packets are basically envelopes that have a bunch of documents in them, and they could be a variety of documents. It could be muster rolls, it could be receipts for clothing, it could be a report of being captured. So every military packet like this is going to be a little bit different. But you can see here, J.L. Thomas, Company G, 31st Alabama Infantry, and then it says C below it. So he did end up in C at some point. Okay, so let's go forward. Okay, so this says there's an enclosure and a prisoner of war record. So that does seem to be correct, that there is a prisoner of war record. Okay, so that's just a note there. All right, so this might be part of the prisoner of war record. Okay, it has, let's look. All right, so yeah, this is part of his prisoner of war record. Here is J.L. Thomas. He says that he swears that he will not do anything until he's been exchanged as a prisoner of war. And here's something cool. It gives his physical description: 5 feet, 8 inches, dark hair, blue eyes, fair complexion. So that's cool. And all right, so that's all that's on there. Prisoner of war record. Okay. All right, so this is again part of the prisoner of war record. He was captured at Vicksburg on July 9th, 1863. And it says J.L. Thomas, private, Company C, 31st Alabama. gives his captain's name and the date. Okay, so he was captured at Vicksburg. All right, let's see what this says. Okay, this is his enlistment. It says he was 28 years old, Company K, Fraser's Regiment, Alabama Volunteers. So we can make note of that and research that unit and see what they were involved with. And his muster-in date was March 22nd, 1862. So it does conflict a bit with his pension record, but he was probably just remembering and not knowing the exact date. But Mims Crossroads, so that is right. And the captain's name. And sometimes you can research the captain. There will be papers at the Alabama Department of Archives and History that has the unit history papers. So if it's necessary to go and look there, that is a possibility. So you do want to make notes of any of the captain's names or leaders of any regiments. All right. Okay, so this is again enlistment information and at Camp Goldthwait. You can sometimes research these camps for more information as well about what those camps, and he enlisted for 3 years or the duration of the war. So some enlistments were not that long. So he was in it till the end. And it's actually a miracle he survived. All right, so here we go. He was captured again at Vicksburg. And that's more, he was paroled, so his parole date. All right, J.L. Thomas appears on a list of officers and men of the 31st Alabama Regiment. Other records indicate the men were furloughed at Enterprise, Mississippi about July 22nd, 1863. All right. Okay, that's just a card, reference envelope, reference card. Okay, so that's everything. So if you get access to this, I would download those images where it says he was a prisoner of war, his enlistment date, where he went for his training camp, which was Camp Goldthwait. And so lots of really great information there. All right, so we've looked at that, and also that he was indeed wounded. Now, the thing that we want to consider is Autauga County. So if he lived in Autauga County before the war, where would he have enlisted? So let's look up Autauga County genealogy. And we'll go down to military records. All right, so he would have enlisted in the county if he lived in Autauga, most likely. And we know that Autauga is further south than Jefferson County. We got a bit of a map here. Here's Autauga and the neighboring counties. Come up and look. So it's a few counties away from Jefferson and Shelby. Military records. So these are the regiments that he could have been a part of. And the 31st is not listed here. So let's go look. And so we're going to look for a J.L. Thomas in Autauga County. If we find a J.L. Thomas with a Civil War packet from Autauga County, then that could be evidence of a separate person. So let's see. There are quite a few here. Any of the 1837 ones are going to refer to the packet that we've already looked at. This 1817 one could be something. Now, I did look at this ahead of time, and I have a note of a Civil War packet. So let's go look at that one. Now, this is for a J.L. Thomas, the 32nd and 58th Consolidated Alabama Infantry Company K, and it's a medical card only. So these packets are not going to have as many, are going to be all different, and they may not have everything in them that you would like. But 32nd and 58th. So if we come back here, 58th Regiment of Alabama Infantry, Company K, would have been from Autauga County. So here we go. Company K, many men from Autauga County and Montgomery County. So we would need to go to the Civil War Soldiers and Sailors database again and look up the 58th Regiment and see what they did. So we don't have any information of the exact battles they were involved with. And so we're a little bit stuck there. There's probably some other sites that we could reference, but we'll want to see if we can't figure out what battles he might have been a part of this one. But here's that military packet and those units that this J.L. Thomas, probably from Autauga County, was involved with. So let's see. It's a medical card only. And medical card, there's a reference number. And here it is. Complaint. Sclopedicum. I'm not sure what that is, but it says on November 4th, 1864, he was admitted to the Jackson, Mississippi hospital. You can see here. Private Company K, 32 and 58th Regiment, Alabama. It doesn't say he died. He was transferred on November 17th. There is this reference here, Confederate something, chapter 6, file number 298, page 202. All right, so that's all there is that record. So this J.L. Thomas, there is a chance that he did die. If he was put in the hospital, I would have to look up to see what that particular condition was, but I'm going to guess some kind of infection of some kind. Okay, so here we go. Vulnus sclopetarium is a gunshot wound. So he was wounded. Okay. So this man was wounded. It's hard to say if he survived that or not. If he was transferred, you would think that he survived, but there was still another several months of the war, and those hospitals were not good places to be. Rampant infection. So there's a good chance that he did die. Okay, so let's go back to our notes here and let's see what we've learned. So there is, now it's hard for us to say for certain that this is the J.L. Thomas that married Sarah May, but it is a good chance. And so that indicates that there is another J.L. Thomas. And we need to spend some more time in looking at these men and seeing if there are other parental candidates. So that might be a discussion for another video. But our win today is that we have evidence for his death, the J.L. Thomas that married Emma Thomas. So let's go to his profile and family search, and let's update his death date. And we'll attach the source and get that on here. And so we've now updated and improved that record on family search. All right. So we've learned a lot, and there's some other things that we could do to add to our research plan here of some individuals. We've got some witness names that of people we need to research. And then we learned that there is possibly a second J.L. Thomas from Autauga County. And this one, because of his location, may be the actual child of John L. Thomas and Martha. We don't know for certain yet. We need to look. We need to do some more looking. So next time we're going to look at a probate record and see how we can analyze that. So if you want to read more about this and get some more source citations, I will have a link to a blog article. If you want to follow this story, be sure to subscribe to the video and get notifications of when I post next. But I hope that was helpful. We'll see you next time.